Hello and welcome to Shatter Lives, Reach Ireland's crime podcast. I'm Paul Healy and I'm joined as always by Michael O'Toole. Hi,
Paul,
Michael.
I would just want to say it was a fantastic idea of yours to suggest a 4-hour special on tariffs. I am up for this.
Dear God, no. Let's not subject people to that.
I don't know what a tracker mortgage is. It is all the way above my head, thank God. Let's just do ordinary, decent crime, thank God.
Yes. Let's talk about what we know, what we can control.
Yes, but we're not experts. We're just two bucket heads who people tell things to.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. We're lucky enough to hear a few things occasionally.
Yes.
We want to start with, God, it's 3 weeks now talking about this, the disappearance of Michael Gaine. And on Monday, I and our colleague Michael O'Neill, photographer, went down to Kenmare for the day to, I suppose, get a kind of a feel of, what it's like on the ground for people locally, to try and establish, what do people think happened to Michael Gaine, and where the status of the investigation is right now. I just want to recap a little bit that, I'm sure anybody reading about this, it has sort of this case has captivated the country, but Michael went missing from his farm in Kenmare now today, 3 weeks ago. So he was last seen, they think anyway, on the morning of Thursday, the 20th of March. And the last known public sighting of him was in the Centra store in Kenmare. There is a petrol station there, and he went in to buy phone credit. And people may have seen the CCTV footage still of Michael buying the phone credit in the store. He then got into his car, and that's the last he was seen of publicly. There is some talk then that he may have gone home, albeit briefly, to the house that he shares with his wife, Janice Gaine. And that house is not located. So some people may not realize that the house is not located where the farm is. So the farm is. Well, it's one thing to kind of I have been working on this story, and you can kind of visualize in your head a little bit, but to actually go down and see the physical location, it really puts it into perspective for you, and maybe also explains how difficult this search has been, And
I just think journalistically, and we always say this, it's always much better to go to a place because you see the context and you can build up the picture, the real life picture. Because when you're looking at a map or when you're talking to somebody on the phone, you don't really get to see that picture. And you always get stuff when you go. And I think you got a good line when you were down there. You spoke to a couple of people.
Yeah, well, again, just to explain, he then supposedly went to the farm and then left his vehicle, a brown RAV4, on the yard. And that is the last, known location that he is said to have been. So that's the first place that we went to, the farm. And we saw, to really see the outline of the farm itself, which is located kind of nestled between this big mountainous terrain around Moll's Gap there, just outside of Kenmare. And it's vast. It's just vast. It's the size of it is enormous. There's ravines, a river, mountainous terrain all around it, and various outhouses. And, you can really see how difficult it must be for those that have been searching, so many volunteers. But we saw the Defence Forces there, and we saw members of Garda Síochána still there, and we saw a drone being flown around the land as well. But I will say, even still, there was minimal activity, really. I mean, we saw that they had a physical presence there, but we didn't necessarily see people searching bushes and whatever else. They've done that now 5 times over.
Would that be an indicator that really, at this stage, further to be searches, they have to go on not hunches, but intelligence or information, because they don't want to be, going around just beating the gorse. They have to have somewhere to look that they think he might be, and that would be an indicator that they're still struggling, really.
Yeah, and I mean that's kind of the feeling that I got on the ground from making inquiries about this, that Gardaí really have ruled nothing out at this point. We have talked about the possibility of foul play, and certainly that is on the table. But really, when you go down and you see the terrain, you realise, if poor Michael Gaine had fallen into a bog hole or something, or if some tragic accident like that had befallen him, it still would be potentially quite difficult to find him. Now, having said that, this has been a search on an unprecedented level. You've had the Coast Guard involved, you've had helicopters involved, drones involved, defence forces, civil defence, 250 volunteers, and the land and the surrounding areas have been searched 10 times over. But it just gives you a real insight into how difficult the terrain is probably for them to traverse. But what was interesting is that the Garda search is not stopping. I mean, sometimes you hear about how expensive it can be to continue carrying out a search, but right up until the end of this week anyway, Garda are remaining to search the site and the surrounding areas, and they are going to do so for the time being. So we also just kind of went into the town and wanted to kind of get an idea of what people thought. And I spoke to the owner of the Centra, who actually happens to be a childhood friend of Michael Gaine. And he said he's devastated by this and couldn't believe what had happened, and said it was entirely and completely out of character for him to disappear. He would be in and out of the shop on an almost daily basis. And we also went down to the co-op, the Kenmare Co-op Mart, where Michael Gaine would have spent 3 or 4, if not 5 days a week, where he had many, many farming friends there, including local councillor Dan McCarthy, who was a very close friend of his. And Dan McCarthy kind of is the manager of the mart and runs the sale of sheep and cattle and all kinds of different animals at the mart. And while we were there was actually that was going on in the afternoon, and we found out that sheep belonging to Michael Gaine, sheep that were on the land, were being sold that day in the name of his wife Janice Gaine. And we stayed for that, and we saw them sell for, there were dozens of them, for roughly a total price of over $3,000. Just to explain, though, as it was said to us, it would be quite common, for Michael to come and sell his flock, and he would have probably done so anyway. And I was told, there was basically nobody to look after the animals on his farm. Obviously, he's gone missing, and a decision, I suppose, had to be made in regards to that.
Yeah, don't they call it husbandry? The animals, cattle and sheep, they can't really look after themselves, so somebody has to. So I suppose it does make sense for Mrs. Gaine to sell these. And as you say, Michael would have probably been there selling the sheep himself. But it is very sad that, 3 weeks on, there's still no resolution here. Yeah,
I suppose it kind of captured, it's probably why it was the top line of our story, just the devastating impact of this. He wasn't there, he wasn't present for this, something he probably would have done all the time, and yes, it had to be done in his absence. And you could see solemn faces around the place, people who would known him for years, involved in the selling of his sheep, and indeed some of his cattle had been sold the previous week, and I think some other cows had been moved on to other lands. So it's a very sad reflection of where things are. I mean, there's no sign of Michael Gaine, and life has to go on without him, sadly. I attempted to speak to his wife, Janice, but she unfortunately obviously didn't want to speak, and you can understand the family are devastated and upset. The house, as I say, is located in an entirely separate location, roughly 3 kilometres away from the farm. So, I mean, she wouldn't really have been able to access the land anyway, as it is still sealed off by Gardai.
Let me ask this, Paul. How close would the farm be to the Centra?
The farm is just outside the town, and the Centra is on the way into the town. Would it even be a kilometre or 2 away, maybe? Not too far really at all from the town. But the farm is very much out on its own in a very sort of, it's a beautiful landscape where it is, out just by Mall's Gap, and indeed there are some family members who live nearby as well. So the family are extremely well known, and anyone I spoke to knew who Michael Gaine was and had known him for years. So everyone's scratching their heads over this, but you find out some interesting things, like, you could read into this or not, but I was told that Michael had in his past, I don't want to say disappear, but he'd gone off the radar, let's say, for maybe 24 hours, 48 hours. And he had done that in the past. But those who know him the best have said, look, don't read too much into that, because this is still highly unusual. I mean, he's now gone 3 weeks. People can go off to a friend's house or might, it go off for 24 hours, but this is highly out of character, I'm told.
Yes, and if I'm right, wasn't his phone and wallet found in his car?
Yeah, so I mean, we talked about this in the podcast. His phone and wallet were found in the car, in the Jeep that was left on the land. It seems as though, I mean, again, those who are closest to him said that he would never do that. And it seems as though something happened in the yard, that he abandoned the vehicle relatively quickly and left his belongings behind. That's highly unusual and suspect, obviously, and there has been an appeal for anybody who may have driven past the farm if they saw any activity on the yard. So, I was told that no one other than Michael should have been on that land at that time in that yard. So if anyone, and it is a main road that passes by it, if anyone saw anyone else around the morning of Thursday, the 20th of March, anyone else around that land, to even if they think it's only like irrelevant in their heads, to just get in contact with Gardai. There is an American man who we did attempt to speak to, but it just proved to be incredibly difficult in the end, because he supposedly lives on the land in a derelict sort of building, of which we saw many. There's loads of different outhouses around the farm, and supposedly this man was living kind of rough and was taken in, I suppose, by a sympathetic Michael Gaine, who allowed him to live on the land, and he would have kind of helped out like a farm hand. And people have, talked about that, but I'm told that Gardai have spoken to this man, and that he's cooperating, that he has told them about the last time that he would have seen Michael Gaine, and he is being treated as a witness in this case by An Garda Síochána. And subsequent to that, there has also been a very curious, again, there's a lot of curious finds in this, but then they could be easily explained as well. A curious find of a bow and arrows in a cave on the land, which you might say, oh, that's a weapon. I mean, it's been seized because it could be potentially of interest, but it could have been being used in a hunting scenario for someone else's recreation. Might have absolutely nothing to do with the disappearance, and it could have everything to do with the disappearance. So of course it's been taken as an item of interest in the case. And the vehicle as well was taken off for forensic testing, and we haven't found out the results of that. And
you would think if there was, any sign of violence, blood or anything, that would have emerged very quickly, and the guards would have upgraded things or something. So it's a real mystery.
Yeah, it's baffling, and it's not. I mean, people do go missing, and you often hear, people go missing. Most people who go missing on purpose. Who knows what happened in this case? It's unusual for someone to be missing for 3 weeks, and for a story like this to have stayed in the headlines for so long. I think it's just because he appears to have vanished off the face of the earth, and there were no signs that he was going anywhere. So, but it was something else to be there on the ground and to actually see the reality of it. And a lot of people are just devastated. I mean, Dan McCarthy, yes, he is a local councillor, but he very clearly, obviously a very close friend of Michael Gaine. He was quite emotional and upset, and really wanted the best outcome from this investigation. And that's why he is speaking out, very much on behalf of family and friends of Michael Gaine, appealing for anybody to come forward, anyone who has any information at all.
Hopefully there'll be news soon, but God, the family and friends must be going through a terrible time.
Yeah, I can't imagine it. And, indeed, they have kept private, and that is their right, I think it's probably, I would imagine, quite difficult for the media to be descending on Kenmare and to, be coming to their door in that. And some people want that, some people don't want that, and we have to respect that as well, and also there is a little bit, I don't know if you've ever experienced this. I'm sure you have, actually. I know you have, that when you cover a story, several days, if not weeks into it, there is a point where the mood in a town, in a place, sort of kind of turns and changes against the media to a degree. And I can understand that. We can overstay our welcome. And I did sort of feel, not with everybody, in fairness, a lot of people were very gracious with their time, but and I understood it. There was a sense of, you're the 10th or if not 20th journalist to come in here in the last 3 weeks, and it's like, fuck off, basically, because there's frustration because it's not getting anywhere, and I understand that.
From my experience, it's usually day 2 or day 3 where the turn happens. But the biggest example of that I can give in September 2007, Jim Walpole, another photographer, and I went to Praia da Luz in Portugal for Maddie McCann.
Yeah.
So Maddie disappeared in May 2007. So we were there in September. And by the way, all the British press corps were still there. They were encamped and I think they stayed until the end of the year. Every day they were there. And when we went there in September, things had turned massively. People were they were anti the whole thing. They were taking down posters and everything. People just didn't want to know. Now that's an extreme example, but usually after a couple of days, and I think we don't really take enough cognizance of this, that we can disrupt people's lives when the press rolls in en masse in one place. So yes, we call it the turn. The turn does happen after 2 or 3 days usually.
Yeah, and you see, I can understand it from a certain perspective. It is a difficult one, though, for us. I mean, for obvious reasons, this has captivated the country because it is just such a baffling mystery. And the media has played into that, but it's also playing into people's interests. Yes, we are reporting on this because people are interested in it, and also because it is just, it is an unusual case. I want to see it resolved no matter what. I hope that Mr. Gaine is found safe and well. Obviously, as time has gone on, people have begun to fear that the worst and that they're now looking for a body. But who knows what's happened to him. But I think, unfortunately, because we're hearing from sources and from people locally on the ground, multiple different theories, when you put that all out there, eventually I can understand people might get a bit tired of that. They might kind of go, well, like, what's the point in putting out this and that and the other, because we don't know what happened to him. So to some people, they feel that that's harmful. I wouldn't say I necessarily agree with that unless what you're putting out is knowingly false. But I think we're just putting it out, that Garda genuinely don't know what's happened here. That this is the state of the investigation, and this is where we are. Publicity
and public appeals do work. It could be 3 months down the road, but when the story or the case is in the public mind, there have been cases where people have decided to come forward and talk and tell things. So, I mean, that's why Garda keep on issuing appeals. And even, say the murder of Emer O'Loughlin, which is 20 years ago this week, that's another fresh appeal. But somebody out there knows something. And the reason why guards do this is, people do have attacks of conscience years after it. So, you can see why we're interested in it, and you can see why the Garda issue their public appeals, because the public solve crimes.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just us, the media. I mean, guards have put out multiple appeals on this. They've kept it alive. And I'd even note comments made by the Minister for Justice there the other day. This week, he was doorstepped outside a Garda station about this case, and he was asked, based off the briefing that he just had from investigators, did he believe there was somebody out there who knew what had happened to Michael Gaine? And he said, I suspect there is. So, I mean, that's playing into a little bit that Garda are looking at the foul play aspect of this as well. So there is something to it. It's not just media hype,
Oh, absolutely. And publicity does help.
Yeah, it does. Absolutely. Should we move on to our prisons just briefly? Because we were talking about prison overcrowding last week, and this is a kind of something that prison authorities have been dealing with more and more. That is the smuggling in of contraband, and obviously amidst all of the pressures that go on in prison, there's been more and more contraband getting in. And we've done a lot of stories in particular about drugs being dropped into prisons via drone. And Mountjoy Prison has just been plagued with it. I was told almost on a complete weekly basis, multiple times a week, in fact, drones were coming in and dropping contraband into the D yard of Mountjoy Prison. And eventually there was actually footage of this, which I think we showed online. And it was a rather sophisticated sort of operation. You see someone flying the drone. You can see they're flying it right over the yard. Actually, that was Wheatfield Prison. And then there's another one in Mountjoy where you can see that the whatever they were holding, it was like a ball that they were holding all the drugs in, was set alight. Then it's dropped onto the net. And because it's on fire, it gets through the net. The net is designed to keep contraband out, but they had figured out a way to get through the net. So this has been going on for some time. So they have been working in tandem with Gardaí and Mountjoy, and they've been working with the Dublin Crime Response Team, who we are quite familiar with and have been very successful with drug busts and the likes in recent times, haven't they, Mick?
Yes, they're a very interesting organisation. They're effectively DOCB, the Drugs and Organised Crime Bureau, is the National Anti-Gangland Unit, headed by Chief Superintendent Shimi Boland. The DCRT, it's for the DMR, the Dublin Metropolitan Region. So it's the Dublin's anti-gangland unit. It's been very, very successful. The biggest drug seizure so far this year was made by the DCRT, 14 million euro. I think it was cocaine. So it's led by Commissioner Paul Cleary, who is the Commissioner for Dublin. Before that, it was Angela Willis, who was the Commissioner for Dublin. She's now over crime special, or all the serious crime stuff, including DOCB. But it's a very, very active group, and it's very, very successful. So I wasn't a surprise that the DCRT were involved in this, because they seem really to be extremely active going against gangs all over Dublin.
Massively so. And in this case, they carried out a number of raids over the last, yesterday. And they carried out searches in Clondalkin, Ballyfermot, Coolock, Talla. And they seized quite a considerable amount of drugs. So 17 grand worth of cannabis, 5 grand cocaine, 3 grand tablets, 22 grand in cash. And they found a drone, a Rolex watch, mobile phones, improvised weapons, drug paraphernalia, weighing scales, bagging equipment. So they believe that they have targeted a gang, a West Dublin based gang, that have been behind this smuggling in of drugs via drones into Mountjoy prison, and probably other prisons as well. And as part of that, they went in and carried out searches in Mountjoy prison. So they worked with prison authorities to be allowed to go in, carried out a warrant, and arrested a 29-year-old criminal who is in for very serious offences. We're not going to name him here, but he has been arrested, and he is on suspicion of being kind of the mastermind behind this sophisticated operation, basically getting drugs in. There is a connection to the family gang, the notorious West Dublin gang that we've been talking about for quite some time, Ireland's biggest gang. Different various sides have been in, I suppose, feuding with or in an argument with the family. And I suppose this is a gang that kind of has a sort of a dispute with that family gang who, are smuggling these drugs in, basically trying to control the supply of drugs into our biggest prisons. But they have shut that down quite successfully.
Drones are a game changer for criminals, really, aren't they? I remember doing a story about drones flying drugs into, it was one of the prisons in Portlaoise, I think it was the Midlands itself. And they were literally flying the drones up to the windows. I mean, it was that sophisticated.
And there have been some stories of that recently, yes, where drones are flying up to the windows and dropping stuff in. Now, they're gone back to doing that because it has become quite difficult to get stuff into the D yard of Mountjoy now, because I'm told, and we'll probably put the story out tomorrow, that prison authorities have splashed the cash, so to speak, on a new sophisticated netting technology. It's like a wire mesh that's being put over the D yard of Mountjoy. Happened in recent weeks. There was a huge works that went on. The yard was actually shut down for a period of time so they could construct this. And I'm told that they believe now that they have successfully stopped overnight the drone's ability to burn through a net and get the stuff in. So, I mean, something that was happening on a weekly basis, they've now stopped it.
Sounds like famous last words, Paul. I will say,
they'll find a way.
Yes, it's a war. So the criminals do one thing, the authorities react. The criminals react, the authorities react. So it really is like a game of tennis, I suppose, isn't it? So they'll always find a way.
They will, and that hasn't stopped them trying to drop them in windows, although it's more difficult, obviously, to get the stuff from a window as it was to drop it into the yard. But they would call it a success in the war so far, a battle in the war. So we'll keep watching that. I mean, I suppose it's the guards and the prison service are trying to show that they are tackling this, that they're not ignoring it. I think in particular when that video came out of the drone dropping it and actually, seeing it physically, sparked a bit of a reaction from the public, and they're doing their best now to deal with that as they can.
I'll just mention very quickly, I think, are they called BACS seats, the special search seats when you get into prison? They do it all over body x-ray. So, and you've been into prison, that all your possessions are taken off you.
Clarify that now. I haven't I've not served time.
No, you've been in the prison. Your journalist is not that bad. Anyway, yes. So all your stuff is taken off. You can't bring your phones in or anything, and all your possessions are taken away. But they do have X-rays, and there are seats that you can sit in. Was it boss seats? I think they're called boss seats. The body scan seats. So, they've upped their game in that regard. But as I say, the criminals find another way. So the criminals will find another way here. It's inevitable, really.
Another thing we want to talk about just briefly is a fairly significant international operation has been taking place targeting those who are distributing and making child sexual abuse material. Called legally here child pornography, and as part of that sharing of intelligence between police forces through Europol, Garda have carried out a number of raids. So they carried out a raid on 9 properties yesterday and seized 18 devices, and they expect to make a number of arrests after examining these devices. But this is pretty disgusting. I mean, basically, there's a believed network across Europe that have been using a service that's been dubbed Kid Flicks, almost effectively like an ability to access a platform, like a streaming type platform, for people to be able to access this CSAM material easily. And it is suspected that there are paedophiles here in Ireland who are helping with the distribution of and viewing this CSAM material. And we don't know how many people are suspected to have been involved, but across this operation, which is titled Operation Fever, there have already been 166 arrests, 111 of which were for the sharing and distributing of CSAM. 594,000 files with illegal content seized, 6,000 digital media platforms. So across Europe, there is a massive crackdown on this, the distributing of CSAM. The only thing is, if these people are eventually brought before the courts, we've seen how we deal with that in this country. But it does at least show that, the police forces around the world are working together to try and shut down paedophile networks.
There is one caveat about how people are dealt with. You talked about possession and distribution of CSAM.
Yeah.
Creating, isn't that the word? Or creating or producing CSAM is really, really serious. And that has happened here. And people have been jailed. Some people think, the child sex abuse material, it's not an Irish problem in that, these paedophiles, they get their stuff from third world somewhere or Eastern Europe. CSAM has been produced in Ireland.
Yeah.
And we know this because people have been arrested and charged over it, and people have been convicted and people have been jailed. But I always remember one investigator, I've said this before, CSAM is a massive problem in Ireland. I remember him saying it's just everywhere. The child sex abuse stuff is absolutely horrible. And it's a very difficult issue for journalists to talk about, because I think people go, I don't want to hear about that.
Don't want to know about it, yeah.
They don't. And I can understand why they don't, because it's horrific. But it is a massive, massive problem. In fact, I remember the first big major operation. It was coordinated by Mick Moran. Yeah, he's former detective sergeant, now head of Hotline.at, was in Interpol and everything. He coordinated a thing called Operation Amethyst in May 2002. And I can remember it exploded. And we thought, geez, this is terrible. It has got exponentially worse since then.
No, and it's, it's hard to cover it, yes, but, I think it is important that we do. I think there is if you're just to read social media, there is a lot of outrage over how many people receive suspended sentences for their first time offensive possession of it. But you're right, they do deal with it more seriously depending upon the graphic nature of it, and if you're involved particularly with the distributing or the producing of it in particular, is looked at more seriously.
So we can be aware of this. Producing child sex abuse material means sexually abusing children and filming it. Yes. That's what it is, and that's why judges do jail people for that.
I think were it not for this, like I suppose it's just become the new norm now. But were it not for this international cooperation, a lot of this wouldn't be possible. I mean, we have a fairly limited resources here in terms of being able to track down what people are looking at on the internet and what they're sharing. We've already seen examples in the past of pedophiles being caught because it was flagged like by the FBI or something. So over in America, and then the information is shared with Gardai. So that's how it happens.
Well, that's where Amethyst came from. It was the US Postal Service, a man called Steve Nelson. I still remember talking to him. He was the investigator who, I think he went undercover and got all the details from a couple who were later jailed for this horrific stuff. But that's what happens. So usually, whatever organization, FBI, whatever, they will get all the data. They will pass it to Interpol, who will break it down by country and go to the guards. Right, here's 37 suspects in your patch, and give all the details. The networks and IP addresses and all that sort of stuff. So international cooperation is really, really vital against producers and users of child sex abuse material.
Absolutely.
It's a horrible suspect. It's just horrible. It is really, really disgusting. And, I understand why people don't want to know about it, but it is a scourge.
It is. And we have to cover it, So I want to ask you about, you had a story about a Garda who has been done for assault. Yes,
that is a Garda, Owen McGowan. Now, he is based in Store Street, Garda Station. His address in court documents is given as Store Street. So 2 weeks ago, he went on trial charged with assaulting a minor in Granby Place, Dublin 1, which is just near the Rotunda. So essentially, he pleaded guilty. And on Tuesday of last week, he was given a 4-month prison term. Now, 2 months were suspended, so it was a 2-month jail time. He immediately appealed that. And when you appeal, it was at district court level. So when you appeal at district court level, the sentence isn't enacted until the appeal takes place. You have to appeal to the circuit court, which is the next higher up court. So that is for the 6th of May when he's appealing it. If he wins, he won't do jail time. If he loses, if the circuit court judge affirms the district court judge, I think it was Judge Michelle Finan, her decision to jail Garda McGowan, then he's going to jail for 2 months.
So, but he's currently out.
Yes, and 2 other Gardaí have also been charged in relation to this. One is charged with assaulting the same then minor, he's now an adult, and the other one is charged with falsely imprisoning the same person. Now, their cases are being held later this year, and they're also in the district court, which is why we have a bit of leeway. But it was a major investigation by what was called GSOC and is now called FIOSRU, the Independent Policing Watchdog. So we just wanted to mark that, I suppose.
GSOC have been rebranded?
Yes. They're now called FIOSRU.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Parties have been banned.
Oh, okay. And you also, we should probably talk about this in light of just talking about GSOC, Drew Harris. So the story has emerged that Drew Harris's contract has been extended by the minister. He was expected to stand down from his role as Garda Commissioner in kind of the first quarter of this year. Well,
June, actually.
Imminently.
No, June.
June. Okay. Well, that's 2 months. It's not.
Yeah. So second quarter, Paul.
He's now going into the third quarter. So yeah.
Yes, he's going to go in September. Don't be complicating things by talking about quarters. Wouldn't you say he's going in September? So yes,
he has had his contract extended. Yes.
Yes. So I don't know what to make of it. I think it was over the process of finding a successor to him, and I think that goes to the there's a new name for the policing authority. It's PCSA. Don't ask me what it is. I just got FIOSRU right. Don't ask me this one. And it only came active in the last week or so. So really, the new policing authority, Police Community Safety Agency or something, right? They have to run the process of appointing the commissioner. So people have to apply, and then Minister Jim O'Callaghan makes the final decision. So I think that was part of the delay. Look, it's not for me to say who's going to be the next commissioner, nor is it for you, Paul. But I will say there is a view, and I can say this as a 32-county Republican.
Okay.
There will be disquiet if the next commissioner is not someone who started off as a guard.
Yeah, I think generally there is definitely a feeling among rank and file that they want, they want somebody who has been in on Garda Síochána primarily their whole career to run the force. I think there have been those who have accepted Drew Harris, but he largely has been not accepted by many of the rank and file, not just because he's an outsider. They just, for various decisions that he has made during his tenure. Now, he's had a lot of successes as well. We're not speaking one way or the other, but there has been disquiet and annoyance over Drew Harris and the way that he has ran the organisation. In fact, he hasn't been invited again to the Garda Representative Association conference, which is happening later this month. So, there is a large amount of disquiet against him. And I do think that they want someone who is more established within the organisation to run it. I mean, there are a couple of names who've been floated around for that role. A lot of people would be looking to Justin Kelly, for example, who obviously is the deputy now, to potentially take that role.
Shauna Coxon is the other. There are two deputy commissioners, yes. Justin Kelly and Shauna Coxon, who is from Canada and has been here for several years. So they would obviously both be front runners. But how many ACs are there? Is it 8? Is it something like that?
Don't know.
I think so.
My head.
Why am I asking you? I think there are 8 assistant commissioners.
Hey.
Anyway, so you have Angela Willis, Mick Gaine, Crime and Security or National Intelligence, whatever it's called now, Paul Cleary in Dublin, Jonathan Roberts in Governance, all that sort of stuff. So they can all go for it. I'm sure there's other ACs, but I think it's about 8, right? So they can go for it, but you would expect the 2 front runners internally would be the 2 deputy commissioners. So we'll see what happens, but it'll be very interesting.
They say they're extending the period of time in order to allow for a competition. I always feel that there's something else going on in the background, a little bit of, can I stay on until X happens? I think if I was Drew Harris, I don't know if he thinks like this. Let's be honest. We don't know what way he thinks, but you'd want to leave on a high. And I do wonder, are there things coming down the road that maybe he'd like to still be commissioner when they happen? For one, I can think of that file that's still with the DPP in relation to the Kinahans. Wouldn't it be some victory for the Guards to say we have charged Daniel Kinahan with murder? And now this is really, I don't think they'll do this, but I hope that they would be able to extradite him this year. They haven't even extradited Sean McGovern at this stage, but I think I would hope at least that can happen in the coming weeks, if not months. Maybe he wants to stick around for that.
He might have to stick around longer than September. I touched famous last words again, but I think it'll be quite some time before the file is back on Daniel Kinahan. It's a big file. It's a very complex file. So I was sort of guided. I know there's a detective inspector, Alan McDevitt, I think, at the inquest into Eddie Hutch, said 6 months. Well, I think he said within 6 months. So it could be a bit longer than that, but we'll see.
We'll see. But, look, he may have to leave anyway by the time his contract is up. I think he has weathered a few storms in his tenure as Garda Commissioner. So he might be happy to just leave before another storm. We'll see what happens.
But he's still a young man. I think he's just approaching 60, which is very young, let me tell you.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I won't take the bait.
Don't take the bait. So, I'm sure there are other areas that he might want to explore when he leaves the Guards.
Mm-hmm. We'll watch that. We will be at the GRA conference where I'm sure there will be a lot of things said about his absence and about the absence of the Minister for Justice, who has decided not to go as well. There is a lot of disquiet about that too. I
think the GRA expressed their disappointment at Jim O'Callaghan's decision not to go with it, basically in solidarity with Drew Harris. Speaking to Guards on the ground, they were very disappointed and they thought this was a chance for Jim O'Callaghan to sort of, renew relationships or whatever. I suppose with Drew Harris staying, it was inevitable he was going to stay away. Because could he really go when the commissioner was snubbed?
No, I mean, Helen McEntee didn't go. So, I mean, Jim would have to follow suit on that. And especially after extending his contract, I think it probably politically it's a decision he had to make. Nonetheless, I do think a lot of guards are very unhappy about it. You know, there was a chance to reset things, but it's still the same government regime, whatever, and they are both different wings of the state that have to be seen to support each other, you know, and they're both going to go to the AGSI conference next week.
Which I'm going to.
Yes, lucky you. They have an opportunity to, you know, lay out their stall there. So I don't know. I think there are many who probably also quietly feel that he should have been invited. So, but the majority have voted for him.
But it was a tight vote. It was the CEC of the GRA, the ruling executive council, and it was tight. Weren't there 2 votes in it? I think.
I don't know. I know it was close.
17 to 15, I think. Possibly, it was very tight.
Yeah. Well, look, we'll watch that with interest. Shall we leave it there, Mick?
Yes, that's been another busy week.
Yes. Okay. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, everybody. And we didn't talk about tariffs at all.